It may have seemed that all has gone quiet on the cladding scandal in recent months. The problems of so many tallish residential buildings that they've been dressed in flammable material, exposed in the years after the Grenfell fire. We covered it extensively on PM, the thousands of people unable to sell their flats, which have become unmortgageable for any buyers. The flat owners facing massive bills to cover, fire monitors employed to parade the corridors. Well, the Housing Secretary, who has that brief alongside Levelling Up, is Michael Gove, who has set out today plans to cajole the big property developers to take some responsibility for remedying the problems they were involved in creating. He is getting tough on them. Just before we came on air, he addressed MPs in the Commons.
This has been a collective failure. Those in government who made the rules did not make them clear enough. Those who built our homes did not build them well enough. Those who made the materials which contributed to the construction of these homes often made them unsafe, at times knowingly. And those who were to check the work that was undertaken didn't always check thoroughly enough. And of course, those who own the buildings have sometimes managed them so poorly that people have been left unsafe, and too many of these owners have still shirked their obligations to make people safe. The only party to this crisis which does not share in the responsibility are the blameless leaseholders and the tenants who live in these buildings.
So that's Mr. Gove's analysis. And this was his message to developers who refused to sign up to a new contract by which they would be paying for part of the repair.
Anyone who fails to sign the contract will be prohibited from carrying out future development and from receiving building control sign-offs for buildings under construction. Mr. Deputy Speaker, if you're a developer, if you fail to sign this contract, you will have to find another line of work.
Well, before we get an update on what his policy is and how it's going down among the builders, let's get an update on one of the victims of this national failure, one we've spoken to before on the programme. Ritu Saha lives in a building which had unsafe cladding removed in 2020. Work is currently taking place to add new cladding to the building.
We have applied for and been granted funding from the government's ACM fund, which was set up after Grenfell, for specifically the similar type of cladding that was found on Grenfell. But apart from this, we have had to do a lot of other work because there were other dangerous building safety defects. And the leaseholders have paid for this, along with paying about £700,000 for fire wardens to patrol our buildings and for putting in new alarms once we found out that our building was dangerous. When I bought my flat in 2015, I thought it would be my forever home. We love living here. We love the community we are in. But unfortunately, 2 years down the line, the building safety crisis in the UK has made me resent my decision to buy this place. It has made me hate my home, which I feel angry about with the government. We welcome the announcement that has been made by Mr. Gove, but this announcement in itself is not going to be of much reassurance to the millions of innocent people still living in tinderbox homes.
Ritu Saha there. Let's just get an update on what Michael Gove's been saying from Peter Apps, Deputy Editor of Inside Housing. So, Michael, Peter, it seems that Mr. Gove is getting tough on the developers. What is he expecting them to actually do to deliver?
He wants them to sign a contract which will commit them to pay for life safety defects on blocks that they've developed. And that would be about 1,500 of the buildings that we know to have fire safety problems around the UK. It does leave some where there's not clearly a developer easily found, or if they've gone out of business, or if it was built by an SME house builder who Gove's not targeting. There remains a category of buildings that aren't covered by this.
We heard what Mr. Gove said was the kind of the threat, really, that they basically have to find a new line of work if they're not willing to sign the contract. What are the developers saying today? Are they all saying, yes, that's fine, we'll sign?
I think that the developers have kind of kept their counsel a little bit publicly. Persimmon, which is, I think, the second largest builder in the UK, has agreed to sign up. Behind the scenes, there's a lot less happiness. I think they feel that they're being targeted as the guys with the deepest pockets, basically, not necessarily because of the greatest responsibility. Gove mentioned in the House of Commons, product manufacturers, for example, and his accepted government itself has some blame. But I think they are people with money, they're people who profited from selling these homes, so you can make a good argument that they're a good first port of call to pay to fix them.
It was very interesting, Peter, listening to Ritu Saha, our case study we just heard from, who said there were lots of other things. It wasn't just the cladding. And I think in lots of these buildings, as you pulled the cladding off and looked behind the brickwork, you do find all sorts of potential problems. And those ones, presumably, do those not have to go back to the developers to sort out? I mean, you know, as people say, if you had a car that turned out to be unsafe, you would definitely expect the manufacturer to put it right.
I mean, well, that's right. And I think that that's what people would have expected to have happened immediately. But because of, you know, sort of a statute of limitations and because of complicated company structures and blaming other people in the supply chain, like contractors and all of that sort of thing, it's been very hard to make a clear line from the defect to somebody who's responsible. And so what this does is it sort of just sweeps all of that complexity aside and says, you are the developer of this building and therefore you're going to have to pay for it. And that, if there is a developer who is available and who is able to pay, is going to be very welcome for, like I say, some of these blocks where that is the case.
Peter, thanks for that. Peter Apps, Deputy Editor of Inside Housing, which has been looking at this very, very closely.